Hello, and welcome to the mentorDINO podcast. I'm your host, Katelyn Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. Join me each week as I speak with amazing professionals in and around the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, as we are all part of a larger interconnected community. We discuss everything from career stories, lessons learned, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, welcome to the conversation. And if you like this episode, please do me a favor by hitting subscribe, like, or share it with a friend. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own unique career journey. On this episode of the mentorDINO podcast, I want to focus on firms. So I'm running a firm series, and this is episode number 2 of 4 of the firm series. So the last episode was on solo firm owners, which I've had many, so it was really hard to only pick 3. And this time I want to focus on partnerships. So sometimes when you want to go off and start your own firm, it's not about going off on your own, but partnering up with another individual to go on that journey with you. And so a lot of the times it can be a partner of 2, a partner of 3, and there's so many different avenues that you can take with a partnership. So I want to highlight 3 partnerships real quick. I've had plenty of partnerships on the podcast, so it's hard to pick 3. So let's dive in. Episode number 55 was with Contour Collective. This is with Elaine Anderson and Andrea LaCour. They are actually ADA consultants. So they've both worked in design firms and started to pivot and go off on their own. So you can always start a partnership with your own consulting that isn't directly being an architect or a designer. You are still designing different aspects and approaches, but being a consultant for a specialty that you enjoy doing. So let's dive in to learn a little bit more about Elaine and Andrea with Contour Collective.
Are such a small piece for most projects that we may be really heavy during a small portion of design, and then we don't hear from them for 2 years, but then something comes up during construction and there's an issue that they didn't expect. And so, the life of the project, we are still maybe involved that whole, 2, 4, 5 years, but we may not even think about that project for a year at a time.
Yeah, you're not in the day-to-day weeds of every little nuance. So yeah, I know like my shock face at 100, but it's like you're more focused on a specific area. You don't have to remember 100 projects and every little detail on what's going on everywhere. Right. That's definitely a different amount of mental power. Like it's more juggling, but similar systems and how you're pulling it together.
Right.
So
I was going to say, we do have some help on the back end. So the lovely admin help that kind of keeps our brains like focused on those organization tasks.
But, You always need the brain checks.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I know we were joking before the podcast on me checking my own brain and sending emails. So where did the idea of Contour Collective come from and starting to go off on your own?
Sure. So, we kind of started as the architecture firm, and we were kind of helping another consultant do their stuff. And then we realized, hey, we really like doing this. We like it more than what we're doing. And we'd like to do it as a women-owned business. There was a need for that, in the construction world. There's not many women doing things. And so, that was a need for that. Also, when you go for public projects, the WBE status is heavily weighed. And so we just found, kind of an open door and a newfound passion that we wanted to pursue. So we kind of, thought about it and came up with an idea and a plan. And the name Contour Collective, we started with the word collective because we wanted to not necessarily pigeonhole ourselves into one focus. Although our heavy focus is accessibility, we didn't want to put that in the name because we still have a passion for design, whether it be furniture or artwork or whatever. So the collective is kind of like just an overall encompassing word for whatever idea we might have at the time. And then the contour is kind of, it's a word that's used in drawings for topography lines, but it's also more of a free form shape. And so, our work is fluid and coming up with new ideas and concepts that kind of help everybody. So it's not, a straight, narrow, hard line. It's flowing. And so we also wanted a short word that we could just say contour instead of, so yeah, lots of thought went into it, but
bunch of lengthy words or avoiding the initials. But it's smart to think of it that way because you never know when you want to pivot the business. Like someday you may not be doing as much accessibility, and who knows what that would be, or bringing on more resources or other experts. Then you don't have to like go through a whole rebrand.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, if we wanted to bring on another partner, but they really focus on interiors, something like that, it fits right in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And so, but stepping back on the accessibility side, I know you guys are both registered accessibility specialists. How do you become a registered accessibility specialist, and what's that process? I don't even think I knew that existed until somebody introduced me to you guys.
Yeah, so that is probably because you are not based in Texas. And so it is one area where Texas actually has a higher level of regulation than a lot of other states. And so here in Texas, every commercial project that has a public accommodation component to it has to have a registered accessibility specialist on the project. That reviews the plans and then does an inspection after construction. So in Texas, there's, a bigger market for accessibility consulting in general. And so, that's how we kind of got pulled into it. But we also then started to learn a lot more than just the Texas focused part and really broadened to general ADA, fair housing, IBC, all kinds of accessibility requirements that would be more national. And so we also are both nationally certified ADA coordinators, which is typically meant for a city or a government agency for, somebody who's sort of maintaining ADA compliance on their end, but really broadens the scope of accessibility beyond a typical building code only. And then to be, registered for these, you have to take a couple of specific coursework on it. And then typically there's a prerequisite to have a degree in a built environment field, architecture, engineering, interiors, landscape, etc. And then there's, like everything else, some exceptions to that. You can do some extra years of work without that degree to get it as well.
And then I'm assuming there's some type of exam, or is it just the courses?
Yeah, there is an exam for both of those certifications.
Gotcha. And I know you guys were mentioning kind of where you plug in the process. So what scope are you handling? I don't know if it is a requirement that Texas has that you have to come in at certain points in that process or review. Like what's the requirement on the Texas side?
Yeah, so the minimum base requirement is to do one review of drawings, usually around a permit set, although the timeline isn't defined, and then to do one inspection after the project is constructed. And after that inspection, you'd issue a report if there's anything found to be a violation, and then the owner would be obligated to retrofit and fix that after the fact. So, of course, you don't want to get to the end and have all these issues and have to go rip out stuff. So we do love working with folks who want to integrate us more throughout the process so that we can kind of help be part of the team in coming up with finding these issues before they happen, and then also assisting with solutions along the way. So depends on the client and the project. We, can be involved the whole process, or we might just plug in these little pieces.
Yeah, because I find I'm just thinking of all my hospital work. If I'm waiting until the permit's set to have you guys review things, things in hospitals get tight and down to the inches because you're just trying to maximize the space you have because there's a very high cost per square foot. I wouldn't want to wait till permit's set to have you guys review. It's like, hey, here's overall layout, what we're thinking, doors, placements, go take a review before I go design the whole thing in case there's a major issue, that would be a big redesign, because a big redesign at permit set is going to be just as costly for an architecture firm. Yeah. Probably not as costly as let's rip out all the walls and construction. But from a firm profit standpoint, a lot of firms aren't making that much profits anyway, that could break them breaking even on a project.
Yeah, you're right on that. And those types of projects, those bigger, large scale projects, I'd say most firms do engage us early on just for that reason alone. Like, let's get it right the first time. And so we'll do multiple kind of reviews at different stages, even one as early as SD sometimes.
Yeah.
So usually those bigger projects, even if the client or the owner hasn't thought about it, because they're just thinking of like, I got to check these boxes, we're just going to do what the state requirement is. We'll kind of have that discussion of, hey, let's think about this. You may want to do that. And they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. Let's do that. We just thought we had to do, just do these minimal things. And then they realize the value added to those. So typically we are involved more heavily on those big projects.
Yeah. And I'm finding some bigger clients now are now requiring architects to come in and do that inspection at the end. And inspection's a bad word for an architect. We don't want to inspect anything. Right. Just to be able to point blame. So do you guys ever offer services to owners directly that may, if they don't need you on the design team side, or the architecture firm didn't think to bring on an accessibility specialist, does an owner ever bring you on just to, hey, I just finished a project, or I need to look at my existing facility. What's your
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways that we might work for an owner versus a designer. But a lot of times is during kind of a purchasing process, due diligence, we'll go in and assess existing facilities, sort of let them know what they're going to get themselves into, especially if they're doing any kind of renovation work. And then a lot of times we will come in on the owner side, not necessarily as an owner's rep, but to sort of defend their point of view if the architect or the contractor has a different consultant, so that there's, two opinions. Want to make sure that everybody converges on what the true, requirement and interpretation is. And so we can really be a strong defense for an owner in that way. And then, of course, we also do some expert witness type of work. So if there is, unfortunately, a lawsuit or moving towards complaints, then we may be, more directed to have conversations with the owner, of course, to let them know what their liability is, but also how they could correct the remedy.
Yeah, because I know a couple of large businesses kind of got hit hard with some of those. I know a local grocery store had to redo like half of their store's ADA parking spots because the slope was too steep. And as soon as you get one person that actually knows the code, and, people sometimes are sue crazy.
Yeah.
So, but saw that and I was like, oh, that's all that patchwork. And then, explain it to people who aren't in the AAC industry. Here's why this is going on.
Right.
So what types of projects are best suited to bring an accessibility consultant on board?
Well, first of all, I would say all of them, because access for everybody is very important, right? But it is required by law for all commercial public accommodation type projects at the federal ADA level. We are based in Texas, so we have that Texas level code, but then the ADA is always big brother because it's a civil rights code law. And so, equal access is the nature of that. And so it can be applied to most all projects, but specifically the commercial, public, governmental type facilities. And then within housing, there's another federal law, the Fair Housing Act. And so that applies to your typical multifamily facilities. There's some nuances with that that could trigger additional compliance. So, your big multifamily projects are also subject to comply. And so we do, I would say about 50% of our work is on multifamily housing. That can be market rate, high-rise condos to affordable housing. So it really runs the gamut. It doesn't matter who's renting or owning. It's triggered by how many units are in a building. So we do a lot of work like I said, in multifamily and then the commercial realm. But we can work for architects, we can work for developers and owners, that we can work. We do some roadway work with civil engineers for sidewalks, any pedestrian infrastructure. We get brought on board for that too. And then, of course, your parks with landscape architects. So anything in the built environment, we can be involved with.
Yeah. And that just also helps with like variety of work too.
Yes.
So. Yes. Yeah. It's fun to mix it up.
Yeah. I've never done a multifamily one, but I think of my brain goes to hotel and how there's only a certain number of ones that have like ADA bathrooms. Right. So is there just a certain number in multifamily that need to hit that at that point? And it's just luck on who's renting, because it's, you're renting one spot. Does an owner have the obligation to upgrade the restroom if it's not ADA compliant?
Multifamily is very interesting because there's actually layers of different types of units. So on a multifamily project that's subject to the Fair Housing Act, every ground floor unit and every unit served by an elevator has some level of accessibility requirements. I would say it's a very low level, but there's still some level, wide enough doorways so people can get through, some minimal clearances, heights of outlets and switches. Mm-hmm. And then there's a requirement for 2% of the units to be a higher level of accessibility called a type A unit, where you might have knee space under a sink, but you still have cabinets that can be removed if somebody needs it, for example.
Gotcha.
And then if you have affordable housing where you're receiving, some federal money, there's another level of type of unit called an accessible unit or a mobility unit that's even more truly accessible for users.
Got it.
I'll also add,
I know.
Yeah, we didn't touch on the residential like the single family type of project. So that's not a requirement really by any accessibility code. But we do like to help people that are considering aging in place in their homes, like planning for the future. And that kind of brings back our passion for design from our residential design experience. So we can help folks plan for the future, maybe put in some bigger doorways from the get-go, put in blocking in the walls for, grab bars in your restrooms and things like that. I was fortunate enough to be able to help out a local organization called Returning Wounded Warriors. It's for vets that came back that were wounded and needed special accommodations in their homes. And so I was able to go in and meet the families and understand their needs and then come up with a plan of how to modify their home. It's, you see put a ramp outside, kind of things like that. But understanding too that the typical codes that are in place may not benefit everybody. And so really figuring out what they specifically needed and helped them come up with solutions is another aspect of how we can be a part of a project.
Yeah, because codes they're meant to be there for a reason, but sometimes they're not conforming to everybody. Mm-hmm. So I have a friend that is taller than the minimum ceiling height I am allowed to do. Wow. So I joke with him. I'm like, you break the code. And so if I'm out and there's a sign that's low and I'm like, sorry, theoretically somebody can hang it that low. So now I add a couple inches to the code as I meet people that are outside of the code.
Yeah.
But definitely getting in and helping just to make sure people aren't paying for things twice if they don't have to, if they're setting up something.
Right.
Shifting a little bit on the business side. So I know you guys are coming up on your 10-year anniversary. Yeah. Do you have any advice or big lessons learned being small business owners?
Well, probably spend the whole hour talking about that.
Hopefully you like each other. We'll start with that.
Yeah, fair. Yes. Know each other before you go into business, for sure. No, it's really wild that we're about to be 10 years. Kind of can't believe that. But I think my kind of biggest takeaway is that life is still going to happen during your career or your business. Some of it good, weddings, I got married, I had a baby, and then, other things that are more challenging, health issues, death in the family. And so really realizing that stuff is going to come up and you have to be able to navigate around it, and you have to be able to sometimes put the business to the wayside and deal with what you need to deal with. And so I cannot imagine doing this without a partner to lean on in those times, because really, there are times that one of us may need to kind of step away and not be so present for weeks at a time. So I think that's kind of my biggest lesson learned, is just to give a little bit of room in the schedule, in your brain, for things to happen. And I think that comes up with staff members too, right? Giving grace to folks who need it. And then also with clients, something comes up, you can't meet a deadline, let them know. And most of the time, if not all of the time, they're totally understanding. And it is what it is. And so I think that kind of leads to my second biggest thing I would say is communication. Just communicate what's going on. If things need to change, something comes up, let folks know, and people get it for the most part.
Yeah, because it's more just letting people know. Like, I tend to don't tell my engineers, but I make their deadline a lot earlier than what it needs to be until they build that trust with me that they'll actually get me stuff on time and I have time to review it and it'll be accurate. Yeah. So I'm not up late, but if they learn as they start hitting those deadlines and they just need an extra day or an extra half a day, I'm fine with it. I'm like, oh yeah, you need an extra half day, send it to me end of day. I'll look at it in the morning. And I can be flexible in that way. But sometimes you just need to ask, like, don't just assume my hard deadlines are hard. Sometimes they are. Yeah. But oftentimes there's flex in it, or it's like a quality control deadline and not real. So
we do that with each other. We're like, oh, we're going to start at 1, and we both know, okay, we're not really going to start till 1:30. Yeah.
But we have talk and catch up. Yeah. The good and bad thing about being friends before owning a business.
It's easy to be like, she's not going to get mad at me.
Yeah. She's going to be late too.
Yeah. But how do you guys find clients? Like, are you focused? I know we talked about owners and being a consultant for architects. So how does the BD side of the business go? Does somebody taking the arm of that? Or are you guys like, how for consultants?
Sure.
Would you reach out?
I'd say when we first started out, it was like, go to every network event, right? Go network with that developer, go network with that architect. So we were kind of stretching ourselves thin sometimes, like going to all these events. And I'm always like, well, I don't want to go by myself. So then we're like double booking to go together. And so, we did a lot of network feelers out early on. We also started offering lunch and learns, and we would say, hey, we can come in and give your crew an hour of our time, and then they can do the self-reported hour that they need for the health and welfare credit.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit of Contour Collective. Now, as I mentioned, partnership can be more than two people coming together. So this one, I want to introduce you to 10K Architecture, and I interviewed Chad Holler. This is 3 principles that came together, and Chad's episode is number 53. So we talk about starting your own firm, and they had a unique situation where they were still working for their previous employer at the same time as starting this firm to help with that transition, because there can be a pretty hard financial burden on that initial launch of a firm, because it takes some time to have projects in the door, get paid out for them, and moving through the billing process. So there are opportunities, if you have very good relationships with your current employer, to transition and slowly be pulled off projects rather than cutting and run. So look at these as opportunities to, if you're looking to start off on your own or starting your own firm, that you could have that relationship and just have that open communication with your firm to make that transition. So again, check out episode number 53 with Chad Holler, and he's with 10K Architecture. So listen in.
Do you have any advice for, I know it tends to be coworkers that end up going off to create a partnership. Do you have any advice for leaving that firm on a good note when there's multiple people leaving? Because it wasn't just you, it was you and Jim. Yeah. That firm was losing.
That was one of the more difficult things I've ever had to do in my profession, because I to this day, I have so much respect for the bosses I had there. I learned a ton while I was there, and I was treated really well there. So it wasn't really that I was leaving a place I was unhappy. It was more that I was seeking my own, going after my own aspirations, my own goals. Um, it's not an easy thing to do. I think all you can really do is try to make that transition as easy as possible. When we left, my business partner Jim was the project manager, and I was the job captain on a pretty major addition to a private school in the metro here. I think a 20 million plus project, and so it was a big blow to the firm at that time because we were right in the middle of the project. Um, but fortunately, our bosses were really great about it. They had done a similar thing on their own. We were able to work together with them, that we would continue to work on contract as we started the firm, help them get that project done and out the door, and sort of transition our way out. And so really that turned out to be a win-win because we got the project done for them, but it also gave us a big kind of steady source of income to start the firm. So it was really best case scenario for us. I think it's probably unlikely that every case is going to be that way, but it's certainly worked out well for us. And I think at the end of the day, when it comes to professional decisions, you have to do things that are in your best interest, but you also want to do it in a way that's as professional and as possible, and try to help that transition as best you can.
Yeah, and it's great advice too, because then it helps others understand it doesn't have to be cut and dry. And just having, if you know there's a project getting completed and you need some more time, at least offer that availability to help finish that project. So a firm's not in a bind to get a project done. Like you're still working on it while you're also working on the business, but pulling back on hours is a great opportunity. Your firm could have said, no, get lost, but at least they were amendable to, hey, you guys are a great team and let's keep this up, and understanding where they were when they started the firm. It's a lot like when we all start our careers. It's, you forget where you started sometimes. So I appreciate that they could reflect back on that and how they started.
Yeah, and reflecting back on it, especially as a business owner now, I know how difficult that would be for us if that happened to us. But I think that experience helped me a lot to understand that this is a profession, and people are going to come and go. People have to pursue what they're passionate about, and if that's not where they're at, then you have to respect that and try to support them if you can, and make sure that departure is amicable. And I always say in situations like that, if you can come out the other end and still be friends, that's a great ending to that relationship. So
yeah, because you never know when you're going to work together, or I don't know, merge firms, like predicting crazy futures. You never know.
Yeah, and even there's been times where they've gotten too busy and they've actually referred work to us, and vice versa. So I think at the end of the day, it worked out really well for everyone involved.
Yeah. And jumping into the company name, because I know whenever I started mentorDINO, I now have a new appreciation of why so many firms are just initials, because so many things are already taken already, but 10K is not any initials. So where did the name 10K Architecture come from?
Yeah, so it's really challenging to come up with a company name. From day one, we sort of said we don't want to name it after ourselves. We don't want to be the firm that has 6 initials, add an initial every time someone joins the firm as a partner. But a little backstory on that. So when I was leaving the small firm in South Minneapolis, I had 2 opportunities. One was a past coworker of mine and a good friend of mine was a partner at a firm in Orange County, California. And so I had gone out there, I interviewed, um, they offered me the job, and at the same time I had this other opportunity come up to start my own business. And so I was really trying to decide, do I move to California and join this firm, or do I stay in Minnesota, which I had just moved back to Minnesota. And so a small part of the name was, okay, I chose Minnesota and I chose to stay in Minnesota. And Minnesota, as everyone knows, is the land of 10,000 lakes. And so that was the initial idea for it. But it was also just that we do have an appreciation for Minnesota and the beauty of Minnesota, and the natural landscape here. And so that was another big part of it, was we were passionate about the Midwest, and particularly designing in Minnesota.
So do you guys just design in Minnesota? Is that where?
No, we didn't think that far ahead about how that might pigeonhole us. But no, we've done work in Colorado, Nebraska, the Dakotas, hopefully Wisconsin here soon. But yeah, we do work a little bit all over the place. So
Yeah. And diving into the work, I know you offer residential and commercial design, and I know some people would pick one or the other. So, how do you guys tackle those different animals and decide what the team works on?
yeah, it's a challenge, and that's something I've learned a lot about the last 6 years, is how different the commercial world is from the residential world. Um, the residential world is a lot more challenging, in my opinion. It's rewarding, but you're working with great contractors, but they operate a different way than the commercial contractors. You're also working with homeowners, which in a lot of cases have never worked with an architect before. They don't even know what an architect does. And so the residential side is super rewarding, but there's a whole layer of education that you have to give your clients on every project, on what that process is, how long it takes, how much it costs. So there's that part of it. The other part of it is, on the commercial side, we tend to we do interior design. We pick all the finishes. We pick every light fixture, plumbing fixture. The residential side, particularly up here, tends to be the architect and the interior designer are separate. And so the interior designer, and not only are they separate, but the interior designer is expected to pick the furniture. They're expected to buy the furniture. And that's just not something we've ever been set up to do. Like tax-wise, we can't purchase furniture. So navigating the residential process has been a bit of a learning curve for us, I would say. We're getting more accustomed to it, better at it. I would say the other thing with the residential side is, when you compare it with commercial, is when we issue our drawings, we want all the selections made. We want every tile, plumbing fixture, we want that all in the drawings. It's in a nice schedule. The contractor takes it, hard bids it, number comes back. The residential side tends to not work that way all the time. It tends to be more fluid, where it's, we still have that schedule, but it's more allowance based. We don't know what the tile is. We don't know what the plumbing fixture or the light fixtures are. So during the process, during construction, it tends to be a little less organized, I would say, than the commercial side. So we're always trying to improve on our processes, but that's something we've had to learn about the residential side quite a bit. As far as who works on what here, I think what's great about our firm is everyone works on everything. So there's 8 of us here, and you may be working on a mental health clinic in St. Paul one day, or the next day you might be working on a a house, a big lake house. So everyone here gets that experience. And I also think that experience improves our work in both commercial and residential. So like for one of our projects in particular, the ham clinic in St. Paul, a lot of mental health clinics or medical projects in general can be a bit, sterile and institutional feeling. So we feel like our ability to do residential actually helps us make that mental health clinic much more residential feeling and more comfortable. And we also don't mind pushing the norms of what a mental health clinic has to be. It doesn't have to be 12 by 12 VCT. What other finishes can we bring in here? And yes, every other clinic does this, but do we really have to do it? So I think that crossover between residential and commercial is actually really important for our firm. The only downside I would say to that is, particularly on the high end residential, it's a big turnoff for clients to see that you do commercial. And we've discovered that just from our experience, that there's this preconception that we can't design something that's more residential and we're commercial, and so we should just pick a lane. So that's something we struggle a little bit with from a marketing standpoint. I'd say the architecture.
That's interesting, though.
Yeah, the architecture firms here tend to pick one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say we are one of the very few that does both.
Yeah, I know whenever I was graduating, granted, it was still part of the recession, so I didn't really have selection options, but I was surprised the lack of firms that weren't both residential and commercial, because like I didn't know which direction I wanted to go in. So it was like, hey, it'd be great to test out both to see what I like, but firms don't really do that. But with residential, it's always, the owners don't know as much about what architects do. They do this once and that's what they do. And so I'm surprised they're turned off so much by you guys also doing commercial. Did you figure that out from like a different events, or were you surveying people?
I think it was through the residential projects that we got, there was this hesitancy to work with us on the interior side. I think there's this general, okay, you're an architect, you do the structural parts of the project and the building envelope, but you're not doing the interiors. We have this other person that can pick pillows and finishes and all that other stuff. There's this kind of I guess stereotype, for lack of a better word, that there is this clear separation between architects and interior designers. And on the residential side, that separation is magnified, twofold, that architects can't design interiors. And frankly, interior designers can't design the architecture, which another great thing about our firm is our interior designers are working on everything. I mean, it's not uncommon for our interior designer to be working on a, wall section or detailed drawing. Like everyone here gets to work on everything.
Yeah, and that's an awesome experience they get. So how does the marketing and business development side change for you as you go after one versus the other, since they have those different nuances?
Yeah, I would say the most successful marketing on the single family residential side has been contractors. So, and I don't know if this is a regional thing or if it's common everywhere, but I think when people are doing this, their dream home, they tend not to think the architect first. They tend to think the builder first. And so establishing relationships with the builders of the projects that you want to do would be what I would recommend the most.
And that makes sense, because I've done residential on the side, and I'm like thinking back to the couple projects I've done. I'm like, yeah, they've already had somebody on board to do pricing and the contractor side, and then it's the contractor that
Yeah.
tells them, okay, now you need an architect to actually
Yeah.
do this. So
It's never, it's very rare unless you have a very well established reputation as an architect that someone's going to call you out of the blue and say design a $3 or $4 million house. It's more likely that you're going to have to establish relationships with builders who bring you into projects, and then hopefully you build that portfolio up enough that you're the first one that gets called at some point. But I would say early on, if you're just getting into the single family residential, your focus should be primarily on the builders.
yeah, that's great advice. Does the
Um,
does the fee structure change between the projects? I've heard, because you have to educate the clients a little bit more, that fee structure
yeah.
is broken out a little bit differently on residential versus a little bit more typical that I've seen on commercial, where they understand what schematic design, DD, or even full packages are.
Yep. I would say the commercial side is much more fixed fee. So that's kind of the norm, is that, here's the scope of the project, give us a fixed fee for everything. That's pretty straightforward. The residential side tends to be percentage of construction up here. And so, but again, if we're doing full interiors and the architecture, our fee is going to be higher than the architect we're competing against, who's giving a percentage of construction for just the architecture, and then bringing in interior designer in and paying them more than likely hourly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that gets tricky. And so I would say if you're structuring your proposal and you're a firm that's going to do both of those, you should separate those fees out, to make it really clear so that your number is not being directly compared to the other architect who's just doing the exterior.
Yeah, it
Um,
helps to find apples to apples whenever, like, even if you're
yeah,
just finding a contractor for a home project and you're trying to
yeah,
decipher who included what, who didn't include something, that then they're going to throw a change order at me, or, oh, we didn't discover that ahead of time. So,
yep, exactly. And I would say we've done it different ways on the residential side. We've done hourly not to exceed a cost of construction,
mm-hmm.
which is, I think, easier to sell up front, because it's easy to make that argument that you're only paying us for the time we spend, and if this process goes really smoothly and it's efficient, you might see some savings in our fees. Um, However, the downside to that is project comes in over budget, and now you've got to go back and redesign, and then there can be this sort of tension that, hey, you designed a project that's over budget, and why am I paying you again? So, and then there's also the argument of, okay, I chose to put in a gold countertop. Why am I paying you more money for the gold countertop?
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's a perfect way to do the fees on the residential side. Um, Personally, I like establishing a fixed fee, whether it's a percentage of construction and then using the budget number for
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, or just saying it's a set fixed fee for each of these scopes of our services, because the other thing we don't want to do is feel like we're handicapped by our fee. We're gonna put in the time and the effort to make sure the project is a success no matter what. And we also don't want clients sort of saying, well, I don't really need you to do that drawing of the kitchen because I don't want to pay you to do it. We'd almost rather just say we're going to do the drawing of the kitchen because it's the best thing for the project. So it's not a clear cut answer I'm giving you. It kind of depends a little on the client and the project. I would say my preference is if you can do a fixed fee, whether it's a percentage, um, or just a straight out flat or fixed fee, that's what I would prefer.
Yeah, because you have to protect yourself as a business first. You can't just always be running out of money with every residential project, or you wouldn't be doing them anymore.
Right.
But giving those opportunities, if you end up with
an owner that is struggling with all the decisions that need made. I find when I have friends that build their own house, they're shocked on the decisions they make, and
Yeah.
they go a developer build house. And I'm like, yeah, that's not even half the decisions you would have to do if you
Yes.
did your own.
Yeah.
And you never know
I
who's going
think,
to struggle or who's going to make decisions and be decisive.
yeah. I think that's also a big process thing too. And it's getting to know your clients well enough that some clients, they trust you to make those decisions and they don't want to be involved in all of those decisions. Other clients want to be involved in every aspect of the project, from what is the outlet style to you know every part of the project. So I think it's asking those questions early on, even before you do a proposal, to try to
Mhm.
get a feel for what process is most likely on this project. Because you also don't want to get in that situation where you're just burning fee because decisions aren't being made and every little detail has to be discussed and you're doing 4-hour meetings. Like
Yeah.
you, it's better if you know kind of what you're walking into before you agree to a fee.
Finally, I have one more clip I want to introduce you to. So, this last one is episode number 38, and it's Hype Studio. It's with Justin Novak and Mike Alexander. They had used to work together, and now they came together to launch their own firm. Um, they talk a lot about mentorship and bringing on a team. So, the firm had started out just the two of them, and as it grew, they started to learn a lot more about mentorship and bringing people on board and doing a little bit more of that design build focus because they have that construction lens to them to making sure that the construction and architecture side can all come together. So I hope you enjoy this little clip from Hype Studio. And again, that was episode number 38 with Justin and Mike if you want to learn more about their full story.
So you originally started Hype Studio and then Mike
No,
joined, or did you guys?
no. So I started NVK Design
Okay.
about 6.5 years ago. I had a team of four total, including myself, and I was at a point where I wanted to grow, but I wanted to grow at more of a leadership level. Um, you know, Throughout the time of NVK, I hired a lot of interns from ASU or U of A, and that was good. And then some of those interns became full-time employees, and we were just at a point where I was wanting to grow the company but add more leadership, because we sort of had the younger generation in the studio working. And so, Mike and I had worked at a design build firm about 10 years ago. Um, we just started having these conversations of, him wanting to pursue more local work, me wanting to add leadership, expand and add leadership. And so I think it was just, as the conversations evolved, I think it's just something where it seemed like it made a lot of sense and it was a good fit.
Yeah, and sounds a lot with timing too,
Yeah, no, I
just
think
for where you guys both were at the time.
very much
Yeah,
so.
and I think to some extent I had been considering going solo for a while, and perhaps the conversations with Justin just helped to kind of fuel the flames a little bit, and quite frankly made it a little less daunting. Um, you know, um, he already had established a pretty solid network, and had done some of the heavy lifting of establishing a firm. And some of the team that he had in place, we still have in the office today, which is great. So it did certainly make it a little easier.
Yeah. And so how did the shift of the name change happen with the partnership, or how did Hype Studio come to fruition?
Yeah, so the practice I had before was NVK. It's my last name, and when I started NVK, and it was meant to really just be a temporary name. I'd never wanted it to reflect me personally because I always had thoughts of having a team, the practice being reflective of a team, and so when Mike joined, as much as like we really liked our branding and the NVK sounded great. We wanted it to be more reflective of, the kind of experience, the kind of work, more team based. And so, and we were just, adding Mike. I wanted, him to feel part of it as well. And so we went through that whole sort of branding, naming exercise, talking about what we wanted out of the practice, what from our prior experiences we wanted to bring to the practice, how did we want, the work ethic, the lifestyle balance, how did we want all of that to be with whatever the new practice was. And so
Alexander Novak sounded a little bit like a lawyer's. So, no matter which way you put it. So we felt that Hype, it offered various things. I mean, there's kind of like an energy that comes with it. It offered like some, even early on, we had a local branding and marketing designer involved, a good friend, Paul Howell. And even as we were going through the naming process, he was also helping us with, hey, this would be great for branding. We could do this. So it was quite a long process. I think for this first 6 months of Hype Studio, we were actually still flying under the flag of NVK.
Mm-hmm. And I know finding a name is so hard. I know when I started mentorDINO and trying to find something that wasn't my name, because like you, Justin, I don't want my name tied to something that I hope grows more.
Yeah,
so it's not
and
easy.
We also didn't want it to. We wanted it to be fun and not like pompous. And I think virtually anything you can think of in the architectural world that has significance is almost being taken by now. So it really is a challenge. We know several other firms that have started since our inception, and they've gone through the same challenge, and it's a tough one.
Yeah.
And I think like part of our thought process was also that at some point we would become known more for our work rather than for our name or our brand, at least in the kind of local realm.
Yeah. And before I jump off into what you guys do, I wanted to get some advice on being a solo entrepreneur versus a partnership. Since I know, Justin, you started on your own, but then coming in as a partner, how is that different? Or do you have advice for anybody looking to start on their own or find that partner to start with?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I started out on my own, I wore all the hats, right? I did everything. I had to go out and get the work. I had to do the work. You take care of everything, and so that was a really great experience. Looking back, and cut my teeth, figured it out, learned. Asked a lot of questions of others who had come before me, and the community is very very supportive as well. I think when I started NVK, they were very supportive. When we collaborated on Hype, they were very supportive. And so, while I might have been just one, I was never doing it alone. My wife and my family were very supportive throughout the whole process. And so while it might have been just me, there was definitely a village helping, and then I think coming together as partners, I was the principal of my own practice that had a team, but Mike was a principal of a larger practice. And so I think that's where we complemented each other well, because, I had sort of grown something from the ground up, but he'd been a part of something that was much more well established, had many more facets to the organization that, if we get to that level someday, he has that experience, and we feed off of each other with having those different experiences, which I think is really helpful.
And one of the reasons why Justin and I started communicating again more frequently was through a coffee group as well. During COVID, we would get together with several of our peers, and several of the guys within that, guys and girls within that peer group had recently branched into their own studios, and there was always like a very kind of willing sharing of information, just kind of anecdotal sharing of what had happened that week, who they were talking to, how things were progressing, the challenges they were facing. And then, as Justin said, like as we formed Hype Studio, we reached out to some kind of really more established architecture firms, a local developer, just to kind of talk to them, and they were really very open about the successes that they'd had, the failures that they'd had, and were very generous with their time and open with just how to maybe move forward with our best foot forward.
Yeah, it's always so helpful to get those failures and lessons learned from others.
Yeah,
and having that community is key.
Arizona, the architectural community is very helpful. It's a kind of quite a tight community, and everyone, we've never really encountered anyone who said, "No, I won't help you."
Mm-hmm. Was there any like key advice that was like a common thread you noticed with all of them?
I mean, I think one thing is it's a long game, right? I think the introduction and of social media and these firms that are young and maybe having really early success, and I think that pressure to be amazing and doing amazing work and winning awards out of the gate is great, but there are these guys that have practiced in Phoenix for 30, 40 years, and they would probably tell you, maybe they're just starting to do some of their best work. And it's a long game, right? So be patient with it, understand your value, what are your core beliefs, really continue to lean in and hone on those things and make that the forefront of your practice, because, that's what's going to drive the right work to you. That's, make that as the key driver, and just know that, we'll be doing this for a long time and we enjoy what we do. So that makes it, okay. But yeah, it's just a long game, and there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, but the ones who just, keep after it are the ones that are still doing it. So
yeah, I think knowing your value is a big thing. When we started Hype, we did adjust some of our fees, and also like a lot of the conversations we had was also just like trying to make good decisions on clients as well. If something feels, and it's also maybe something that we learned back whilst doing design build, but it's a long process going through design, especially in the residential field. You become very kind of intertwined with your clients. So just knowing if you have any kind of concerns about chemistry early on, then it's worth considering that it might not be the job for us. And I think one of the things, like if we do have a client that doesn't seem right for us, or the work doesn't seem right for us, we typically try and make sure that they do find the right person, within that network of peers that we have.
Yeah, and I think it's important not to just take everything whenever you're starting out, because then you could hit that bad client that really can tear you down really quickly if you're not careful.
And we've had a few of those, and I mean, I think it's a continuing process of learning to weed that out. I think also, like, one of the things early on was that every time the phone rang, we would go out and meet people on site and review, the jobs. And after a while, we quickly realized that we had to vet clients a little bit more, try and understand more clearly, like whether they had clear expectations of budget, of like what they could actually do. And because our time at such a small business, our time is pretty valuable. So these meetings really need to be quite lucrative. So we spent a little bit of time just kind of trying to be a little less excited every time the phone rang, and really kind of talk to potential clients. And we now have questionnaires that we'll send people and things, just to make sure that there's an alignment. And to the same extent, we'll have one or two of the guys involved with each construction project, and we go through that same process of this is what we're going to do. This is why we're going to do it. We try not to throw them in at the deep end in a way where they're kind of fighting for their lives, but there's a little bit of kind of just giving them a lot of responsibility.
And to know that they have a lot of responsibility. There's a team behind them, or there's principals behind them that are there for support.
Yeah.
And we're not just telling them what needs to be done. We're asking them to be creative, or to talk with a sub, to talk with a metal fabricator about the details and what the design intent is. And if they do need help, that we're obviously right here, but it's an opportunity for them to learn and grow. And I think the team has grown dramatically through the construction projects that we've overseen. And
yeah. Do you have any advice for someone looking to focus on high-end residential?
Yeah. No.
Get a shrink.
Get a shrink for your clients and a shrink for you.
Probably one for each, just not the same one.
Yeah.
I think it boils down to growing your network and growing your portfolio. I think getting out of the architecture field, out of the field from like a networking standpoint, and meeting people that are outside of that are in, related industries or unrelated industries. I think we've only ever had 2 clients that were architects, and so it's like those aren't going to be your clients. Those aren't going to be the people that refer you, and so, we make it a point to meet with developers and general contractors and people in real estate, and then just out and about casually in life, whether it's, on the weekend at coffee, or, during the week at the gym, or, wherever it is that we're meeting people and growing the network there. And that way, I think is really important, because I think you come out of school and you spent this really focused time with other architects or other designers and that, and then you go work at a firm where that's what they all are as well. And I think if you let that be your experience, then you're missing out on, just so much education and growth that's out there that's beyond the realm of architecture, that can feed back to it in all kinds of ways, whether it's education or clients, And so, and then building a portfolio, when I started out, we were doing small remodels, small additions, but with each one came an opportunity to either, do well for a client that would lead to something else, or a design opportunity, where it said, hey, we want something really cool here, really modern, or really something very thoughtful. And so, within each project, there's an opportunity to learn from that. Sometimes it's design, sometimes it's business, sometimes, it's all, planting the seed for what the future may become.
Yeah, I think early on, in the beginning, during the first year, I think we had about 25 projects going at any given time. And that was a lot. They were small projects, and now we have larger projects and maybe about 12. But I think there's sowing seeds for the future. One of our large homes that's under construction now, I think if we were to give a proposal for that job now, it would probably be about 5 times the price. But at the time, there was a business decision that was made, and a realization that we did the job for somewhat of a bargain, but as a portfolio piece, it would definitely kind of pay itself forward. And I wouldn't recommend undervaluing yourself at any time, but it was a business decision in order to kind of create portfolio, perhaps more in the luxury realm of architecture.
Yeah, but that's important to talk about value, because I find sometimes the solo entrepreneurs that I talk to have a hard time finding where their value is, because they don't want to lose the project. So then they try pulling themselves back, so then they seem more affordable. Or even on the commercial side, I see fees stay pretty low, and I'm like, why? This is going to take so much, or learn from your prior projects, so then you can get that fee adjusted to where it needs to be.
I think like over the course, we've made a conscious decision to kind of grow our fee annually. And I think it's representative of, it is the value that we bring to any project. We've spent a long time getting to the stage where we can offer our clients the expertise that we carry. We've got a great team behind us. And there's just value in that. We're not overcharging anyone. We're just getting the fair value for the services that we provide.
And I think that gets back to the sort of the education that we do with clients at the beginning of a project. We present them with a proposal that breaks down the process, that breaks down, what consultants are going to be a part of the project, what their fee might be, even though we might not have a design yet. But
the big one in that, I think, is also deliverables. So they see like, hey, at the end of each part of it, we're giving you all this.
Yeah, these are all the meetings that we'll have. These are all the iterations that we'll do, and really showing that whole, in a perfect world, one of our projects might take 6 to 7 months in design, and just forecasting that for them, and then they can see that, oh, holy cow, there's value to all of these meetings, to all of these updates, to things like that, and a lot of times our projects go beyond that, right? Projects that could be in design for a year, 2 years, and we don't ever like to do, add services or change orders for our scope of work. We felt like we tried to outline as much as possible in the beginning.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed the little clips I pulled together of a few of the partnerships that I've had on the podcast. If you need a refresher, it was episode number 55 with Contour Collective. That was Elaine and Andrea. Blah. Do that again. Episode number 55 with Contour Collective with Elaine and Andrea, and they are ADA consultants. Episode number 53 was Chad Holler, and he is with 10K Architecture and had a partnership of 3 professionals. And then episode number 38, Hype Studio, Justin and Mike, starting their own more design build partnership and getting that launched. So I hope you guys enjoyed learning about the partnership option for starting your own firm. And if you haven't already, you can go back and check out the solo entrepreneur episode and stay tuned for the next 2 episodes of the 4-part series on firm ownership. I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.